Guys, that's hard enough to follow. I had to fill in for Eddie. That's hard enough. But following that, I'm not sure what I can do. And being Mother's Day, that's another added pressure point. When I get to Scripture, I will be in 1 Kings chapter 3. So if you want to turn there. I'm going to start off with a quote. Most of you will not recognize who it's from, so I'll tell you when it's over with. And those of you who don't understand who I'm talking about, ask somebody who does. A small child waits with impatience the arrival home of a parent. She wishes to relate some sandbox experience. She is excited to share the thrill that she's known that day. The time comes, the parent arrives. Beaten down by the stresses of the workplace, the parent often replies, "Not now, honey, I'm busy, go watch television." The most often spoken words in the American household today are those words, "Go watch television." If not now, when? Later? But later never comes for many, and the parent fails to communicate at the very earliest of ages. We give her designer clothes and computer toys, but we don't give her what she really wants most, which is our time. Now she's 15 and has a glassy look in her eyes. "Honey, do we need to sit down and talk?" Too late. Love has passed. The words of Robert Keeshan, better known to a lot of us as Captain Kangaroo. I think he had something to say to us. There are a lot of things that cause us stress, but there are few that can break the heart of a child like the loss of time. Many of us suffer losses of children, and I don't know that there's anything worse than having to stand at the foot of a grave of one of your children. But we can lose children not just through death, but other circumstances as well. We lose our children when we ignore them. We lose our children through broken relationships. And we can lose our children by failing to develop in them a strength of character that they'll need in this world to resist evil. Being a mother is probably one of the most demanding jobs that you can have. As a matter of fact, according to a report from salary.com, a website that researches jobs and all over the country and the amount that they get paid, they report that stay-at-home moms would earn an average of $131,471 annually, including overtime if they received a paycheck. Now, that's a base salary of $43,000 for a 40-hour week, and most people would say that they earn that other $88,000 in that 60 hours of overtime that they put in. And that's just the wake time. That's not the sleep time of when they get up in the middle of the night and take care of other things. Mothers, in describing their jobs, listed things like daycare center teacher, van driver, housekeeper, cook, chief executive officer, nurse, and general maintenance worker. That pay does not include what those commercials of MasterCard used to say, that things that are priceless. You know, like the hug that comes at the right time. Cutting off the crust of the sandwich in just the right way. Reassuring laughs that remind us not to take ourselves too seriously. And the countless other little things that mothers get on Mother's Day. I'll be honest with you, I've preached for over 40 years, and there's no more difficult task than preaching on Mother's Day. It's daunting, to say the least. You're supposed to encourage, and most of the time preachers spend their time chastening, or holding up examples like Proverbs 31 that what mothers cannot meet, and after the sermon is over with, you are chastened yourself for preaching and challenging too hard. I've gone through all of the different kinds of sermons that you can preach on Mother's Day. I feel like the preacher that started out his first sermon on family was 7 laws that you need for a good family. He changed it then to 7 principles that you need. He then changed it to 7 rules. And then he came up with 7 suggestions. And then he just quit preaching on family altogether. I've run the gamut. So what I have to say this morning is not, it's intended for a word of encouragement more than anything else. As a father, what can I say to a mother? I didn't go through childbirth, even though I was there in the room. I didn't carry the child for 9 months beforehand. The best I can do is offer some insight from what God's Word has to say about that, and I hope you take it in the manner in which it is offered. 1 Kings chapter 3, beginning in verse 16. And I will remind you, I read from the Holman Christian Standard Bible. Then 2 women who were prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. One woman said, "Please, my lord, this woman and I live in the same house, and I had a baby while she was in the house. On the 3rd day after I gave birth, she also had a baby, and we were alone. No one else was with us in the house. Just the 2 of us were there. During the night, this woman's son died because she lay on him. She got up in the middle of the night, took my son from my side while your servant was asleep. She laid him at her breast, and she put her dead son in my arms. When I got up in the morning to nurse my son, I discovered he was dead. That morning, when I looked closely at him, I realized that he was not the son I gave birth to." "No," the other woman said, "my son is the living one, your son is the dead one." The first woman said, "No, your son is the dead one, my son is the living one." So they argued before the king. It's interesting to me that Solomon is presented here as a deciding judge between 2 prostitutes. Now, a king often would make judgment in certain cases that weren't decided by the elders of the city. That was part of his responsibility. But the fact that he makes a decision between 2 prostitutes is very interesting to me, that he's portrayed in that light, because prostitutes were the lowest of common denominators in the kingdom at that particular time. Usually a prostitute was one of those who had been sold into slavery to the temple by her parents, or she was possibly divorced and had no other way to make a living other than give herself over to that, or she was beyond the age of marrying and nobody wanted to marry her, and she didn't have any other way to earn an income, and so she gave herself to the temple as a prostitute, which was a common practice in Solomon's day. But nonetheless, here are 2 women who are living together, and they make the point several times that there's nobody else in the house. There's no other guest in the house. They're living together to share expenses so that they don't have all of the cost of living on one of them. You would think that they're living in the house that they would get along a little bit better than what they end up getting along. But when I look at those 2, one of them rolls over and kills their child. She loves children so much that she goes and takes the other mother's child. Then you have the second mother whose child has been ripped for her in the middle of the night, And they get into a disagreement that can't be settled, and so they bring it to King Solomon, who's supposed to be the wisest man that ever lived. And if you doubt that, read the book of Ecclesiastes or the book of Proverbs. He's responsible for most of the book of Proverbs and all of the book of Ecclesiastes. And he really was wise, although I questioned that when I figured that he had over 3,000 wives. And if you don't get that now, you'll get that later. You can laugh about it. I hope you can anyway. It was intended as a joke. And it went over like a lead balloon, I can tell. These two women come to Solomon hoping that he's going to decide the case. What's really interesting is that he's not the one who's intended to decide the case. This is all an illustration of Solomon's wisdom. And if you go back and read, where did he get his wisdom from? It was a gift of God. Because he prayed and said, Lord, I don't know how to lead your people. I need your wisdom. And God blessed him with insight and understanding that was beyond his years. And we have an example of that right here. Two women who have a tenacious love for children. It's hard to separate children from their mothers. There can be vast differences of miles, but there's still a closeness of heart that you just can't get away from. Both mothers in this instant love their children. Now, one is deceptive in what she's doing because she wants a child. But there can be no doubt in anybody's mind that both mothers love children. And there can be no doubt that every mother in here loves children, loves her children, and would be willing to give their lives for their children. There was a story years ago when AIDS was an epidemic that we focused on quite a bit. It was a story by CNN that was out in San Francisco. And this man that they were interviewing had AIDS. He had already lost his mother. His father had disowned him because of the way that he got AIDS. And they were trying to get at the heart of the agony of this man of dealing with, he had no support whatsoever since his father disowned him. His mother was already gone, and he was trying to deal with this devastating disease that ripped the life from him. And the interviewer asked how he was able to stand the pain of dealing not only with death, but dealing with all of the agony that goes along with it alone. He gave an interesting answer. His answer was, I stand it by closing my eyes and imagining that I will awaken in the arms of my mother. I know that she will never leave my side. Mothers love their children regardless. Fathers, on the other hand, well, that's for another day. How many of you know Irma Bombeck? Nobody? Nobody raised your hand? I'm so disappointed. She wrote a column for a number of years. This was taken from one of her columns. For the first 4 or 5 years after I had children, I considered motherhood a temporary condition, not a calling. It was a time of my life set aside for exhaustion and long hours. She thought it would pass. Then one afternoon, with 3 kids in tow, she came out of the supermarket with one of those buggies where the wheels seemed to go in all 4 different directions. As she was headed out of the grocery store, one of those, a toddler, probably the oldest boy, escaped her, ran outside, and went to, of all things, the bubblegum machine. You know those things that they have a stand and they got glass around them? And the little boy was hanging on to the bubblegum machine, shouting with a piercing shout, "Gimme, gimme!" You know, children can do that in such a way that it pings your eardrums. She told him, she said, "I'll give you something that you're not going to really want if you don't stop shouting and get over here." She tried to physically pry his body away from the bubblegum machine, and you know what happened? He pulled it down and broke, and bubblegum went everywhere. By this time, there's a crowd, and she starts to chasten this little boy. Said, "If you don't get control of your temper, you'll be making license plates in the state penitentiary." He was trying to stifle his sobs, and he was looking around, staring at the crowd, and then the little boy did something that she did not expect. The little boy came running over to her and grabbed hold of her legs and wouldn't let go. It seems that she had embarrassed him in front of a crowd. She said, "That single incident defined my role for life. I was a major force in this child's life. Sometimes we forget how important stability to a child is." The easiest part of being a mother, she used to tell her children, is giving birth, and the hardest part is showing up for it each day. This is the day when we honor our mothers. I'm not so sure that one day is enough. I think we probably should reward our mothers a little bit more each and every day. I mean, they do ignore those times when we as children say, "I hate you," and turn our backs on them. How can we say thank you for showing up? Because mothers are tenacious in their love. They refuse to let go. Those two mothers are pretty good examples of that to me. But there is something else in this story that really captured my attention. Picking up in verse 23, the king replied, "This woman says, 'This is my son who is alive, and your son is dead.' But that woman says, 'No, your son is dead, and my son is alive.' The king continued, 'Bring me a sword.' So they brought the sword to the king. And Solomon said, 'Cut the living boy in two, give half to one and half to the other.' The woman whose son was alive spoke to the king because she felt great compassion for her son. 'My lord, give her the living baby,' she said, 'but please don't have him killed.' The other one said, 'He will not be mine or yours. Cut him in two.'" I see a mother that has a tremendous love for her child. The word translated, "she felt great compassion," is an interesting word, whether it's in the Old Testament or the New Testament. Hebrew or Greek, they describe the same kind of feelings that start in the pit of your stomach and work its way out to some kind of action in that person's life. When it says that she felt a great compassion, she was so moved within her being that she could not keep still or keep silent. Mothers are like that. When they think that their children are being injured, or there is a possibility that they're injured, mothers have this, we describe it as the mother bear complex. Don't mess with the children. Mama bear will come and get you, and you don't want that. We described it another way in our household, and we said, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. So we tried to make mama happy most of the time. Alan Cox shares a story about growing up along the Mississippi River in Vicksburg. He said that he had the meanest mother in Warren County. Her list of rules had no end. Here's some of them. See if you recognize them. We couldn't sass. We couldn't say yep. We couldn't say nope. We couldn't ask for something without saying please. We couldn't accept something without saying thank you. We couldn't say golly. We couldn't say gee. We couldn't eat without saying grace. He said his mother was nothing but a list of rules, and more rules. And they weren't limited to their house. He said the Queen of Maine had rules for everybody, everywhere. No smacking gum in the car, no undressing mannequins in stores, no belching in restaurants. Even in church, Mother was mean. As the church pianist, Mother didn't sit beside us on the pew, but never fear, Mother's eyes could execute orders from afar. No words were required. We called it the look of death. Personally, I never understood how Mother could stare at 3 kids simultaneously without moving her eyes in either direction, but she did. No blinking, no wrong chords, just steady staring and steady playing. Lips puckered, one eyebrow cocked, and shoulders rigid. Sometimes it took us a while to realize that Mother was in the look of death mode, but once we figured it out, it didn't take us long to get spiritual. The terror of the Lord was one thing, but the terror of the pianist was something else. Mother was a gifted woman, capable of doing just about anything, but nothing was more important to Mother than raising her kids. At times I wished I'd been otherwise. Mother would have been an excellent commanding general of the U.S. Marine Corps. Giving orders was what she did best. Recently I overheard a mother counting to 3 after telling her offspring to do something, and I couldn't help but chuckle. Mother never counted to 3 to tell us to do anything. She didn't even count to 1. She ordered, we obeyed, no countdown. Meanest mother in town. Where did they go? Sometimes, don't mean this as a criticism, just an observation. Sometimes I think mothers, fathers, parents, doesn't matter, are more interested in being friends than they are the parent. I think we need some mean mothers now. It shows that tenacious love because we're interested in raising gentlemen and ladies. A teacher was teaching her class, a 2nd grade class, on the lessons of magnets. And she explained what a magnet is and what it does. And the next day she was given a test. And on that test was this question. My full name has 6 letters. The first one is M. I pick up things. What am I? Over 50% of the class listed mother. It's 6 letters, starts with an M. The real answer was magnet, but mothers pick up things. They pick up children, mostly. Here's a bit of advice, the only piece of advice that you'll get today from me. Legally, a husband is the head of the house and a pedestrian has the right of way. Both are perfectly safe within their rights as long as they don't try to confirm it. Can I ask you to do something for me today? Take your bulletin. And I'm going to wait for you to do this, okay? I want you to take your bulletin. I want you to take a pen. I said earlier that I don't think one day is enough to honor mothers. I want you to think about and come up with 5 ways that you can honor the mothers in your life, the mother-in-laws, the aunts, mothers here. We're all supposed to be brothers and sisters in Christ, and so if there's a mother here, then while you're here, you need to honor those mothers. I only want you to come up with 5 ways in the next year that you can honor your mothers throughout the year. I want you to write them down. This is a test that you hand in at the end of the sermon. You think I'm kidding, don't you? See, I'm retired now. I got all the time in the world. I can wait. I want to see some of those, and I want to hear some of them when you leave here. 5 ways that you can honor your mothers for the tremendous love that they have given you, for the impact that they have made on your life, for the sacrifices that they've given you. How can you honor mothers? It's more than just one day a year. You know, you actually honor your mother with the way that you live. You are the legacy that they leave. Take this example, and I'll close with this. One day, several convicts were in the library of the prison. They were looking at this merchandising catalog, and they were talking about different things. And one of them said, "Man, I sure wish I could give my mother that house, that she had a place to live. She wouldn't have to worry about it anymore." Another one said, "I would like to give my mother that car. That way she would have a way to come and visit me." The third guy that was around the table, after a few minutes, the other guy could see tears start to form in his eyes, and he said, "I wish I could give my mother a more honorable son." What is it that you would like to give your mother? Not just today, but every day. Your mother is a gift from God. And you need to honor your mother as long as you can. Because take it from me, she's not going to be here forever. And if your mother is not here, that's an opportunity for you to honor other mothers and help them. One of the greatest benefits of being in so many different churches over the years is that we've had adopted grandchildren all over the world. Every place we go, and now since we do some camping, we get to adopt children wherever we go when we go camping. What can you do to help mothers? What can you do to honor mothers? Maybe it's live right. Maybe it's live after God's own ordinances. One thing I know for sure is that He wants us to honor those women who gave birth to us. What can you do? I'll expect on the way out to receive some notices of your answers. Pray with me. Father, I thank you for your love through mothers. I thank you for the way that you have cared for us through those women. I thank you for those women who are gathered here this morning. I pray that you would pour out your power and peace on their lives. I pray that you would bless the men with strength to encourage, to be helpful, to be encouraging. Help us all, Father, live according to your will and your ways.